Is there a coordinated effort by liberal politicians and activist groups to stifle the speech of conservatives, to intimidate them and scare them from getting involved in the political process? Well, a new book makes a case that is happening across the country. I spoke with the author and Wall Street Journal columnist Kimberley Strassel.
To this day, the administration likes to say, oh, what happened in the IRS? Just some guys out in Cincinnati, they didn't understand the law. That was a boneheaded error. Baloney. What we had was Citizens United, the left very worried about the midterm backlash that was coming in 2010. You had elected senators and House members on the Democratic side sending letters to the IRS saying, you need to do something about all these nonprofits that are pouring into the electoral sphere. The president was out every day on the stump for candidates saying the same thing. Look at all these shady groups. We don't even know who's supporting them. Maybe foreign governments are supporting them. Someone ought to do something about this. And guess what? The IRS did.
And indeed, much of the focus has been at the national level, with Congress investigating what happened at the IRS. But Strassel says it's happening at the state level as well. Listen to this chilling story.
What we saw in the IRS, I think, was the broadest example of intimidation because it affected tens of thousands of Americans in these Tea Party groups. What you've seen in places like Wisconsin, I think, represents some of the nastiest forms of intimidation. And in that case, you had a liberal prosecutor who went after 30 conservative groups who had supported Scott Walker's government reforms. And this guy clearly took it personally. It was cutting the power of the state. He was part of the state. And he launched a secret probe. It involved secret subpoenas. It involved pre-dawn raids into people's houses. In one case, I think the most horrifying case, one of the targets, he and his wife were out on a charitable fundraising trip. Their teenage son was home alone. Pre-dawn raid, the police come in, put him in a room, won't let him call an attorney, won't let him call his grandparents who live down the road, and then as they leave say, if you tell anyone what happened here this morning, you could go to jail.
Something else the left doesn't like is anyone who disagrees with them about climate change.
The examples that I give in here are, for instance, elected Democrats in the Senate in particular, and also in the House, launching these kind of witch hunts against professors at universities who had put out science with which they disagreed. They sent all these harassing letters to the universities demanding 10 years worth of their work and correspondence. It was all designed to say, if you continue to employ these guys, if you continue to give them a platform to say what they say, we're going to make your life hell. So you see it in that regard, but now you've seen that replicated in the attorneys general who are going after Exxon and the free market groups that have worked with Exxon in the past, saying if you keep putting out climate science that we don't like or supporting, that you could end up with racketeering charges and consumer fraud charges. And that's really scary because that's law enforcement getting involved.
The debate over free speech goes back to America's earliest days. I asked Strassel, what did the founders think about individuals and citizen groups jumping into the political fray?
They would have called it factions, and they loved it, and they wanted more of it in there because they felt that the best way for society to work through its problems was more speech, more speech, more speech. And people weren't always going to agree. There were going to be disagreements, but this was how they tried to set things up. It's why the First Amendment is the First Amendment. The right to free speech is the most important part of the Constitution. I had a great guy in there and he said, one thing the founders understood was if you have free speech, you can't have a tyranny. And he goes, so ask yourself, why doesn't the left want free speech? And I think it's a really interesting thing to ponder.